I've been, it's funny, and you will be doing it when you cast your mind back on your life.
Yes.
You know where you thought you'd go, well, more or less, and then you see where you are,
Yes.
and you think, what are the threads that have all woven together to bring me here? And at this point in my life, I see, people who I went to school with decades ago and what they're doing with their lives. And we all take an interest in what other people are doing. And you ask yourself those questions. Have I landed where I wanted to land? And I have
Yeah.
to answer, I've certainly landed nowhere near where I thought I'd be, but it's
Yes.
good. It's
Yeah.
okay. Well, I originally, when I was bright eyed and bushy tailed and, launched off into my world, I'd been fortunate enough to be born into a family where my dad traveled a lot. And that was quite unusual in the 60s and 70s, but he represented the New Zealand dairy industry, and he was basically selling our dairy things around the world. So as a child, I grew up realizing there was this big world out there. A lot of my friends didn't see or didn't sense. I'd get phone calls along with my sisters and my mum. We'd get phone calls from my dad from the other side of the world. Hello, 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 hello. Is that you? Is that you? Is that you? This terrible echo.
Yes. Oh my god.
But he would say, I'm in Barbados or I'm in China or I'm in Malawi. So I felt as I grew up that I knew the world was big. And my dad always said, the more you see, the more you know there's still more to see. You'll never
Wow.
see it all, but make sure you see some.
Wow.
So
What a wise
as
man.
as kids, we went to live in England for a little while and then back to New Zealand. And then in my teens, we moved to Germany and to Argentina, very opposite the kind of countries.
Mhm.
So I came back in my late teens and just had world experiences that were, that had opened my eyes about poverty, about injustice, about just, the humanity of
Mm.
people. I was in schools where many people around me didn't look anything like me, had many different languages, and we're all in this melting pot called a school. And I guess it really helped me to understand it didn't matter what a person looks like, what they sound like, where they come from, the color of their skin, their eyes, their clothes, whatever. We're humans. So when I finished school, I went and did a degree at Victoria and kept thinking, what am I going to do with my life? And felt very much that I would start as a teacher, as a high school teacher, which I did.
Mm.
And then I moved into youth work. I met and married my husband, Michael. We together did youth work. He went on to train as a church minister in the Baptist church. And one of the reasons I loved him was because he was very grounded.
Mm.
He was an artist. One of the ways he connected people in his community is he just ran free art classes for people. He had this wonderful way with people, particularly those who had mental health issues.
Wow.
He had he just had he had this real gift with people.
Mm.
So our home was full of people staying, coming for refuge sometimes, for respite sometimes. Then we had
Wow.
children and we needed respite. No, we had
Wow.
3 children. Uh, and as we look forward in our lives, we didn't get paid. We got paid hardly anything. We were living on
Yeah.
the smell of an oily rag. And so the arts was very much part of our world, encouraging people who were involved in the arts to express themselves and how they saw their world and their faith.
Wow.
People came from all around our city to spend time with Michael. He wasn't a power monger. He was just this very l- loving, caring man. Tragically,
Yeah.
when he was 38,
Yeah.
he took his life by suicide.
Yeah.
It came out of left field,
Yes.
but in retrospect, it didn't, but
Mhm.
at the time it did. And he was someone who was often called in to go to the most difficult situations. He'd been asked to support people through sexual abuse and going through the police and taking court cases and things. The police got to know him well because he was able to be a safe place for people to be
Yes.
with and understand him.
Yes.
Anyway, he was one of life's one of a kinds,
Yes.
and he always, at the same time, managed to be a great dad and a great
Yeah.
husband. And church life, I don't
Yes.
know if you know too many people involved in church life, but church life is no different from, you know, a sports club or
Yeah.
any kind of hobby club or any group that we're a part of at all. There are people in them.
Yes.
And that gets messy and hard from time to time.
Mm.
And just because people are Christians, it doesn't make them in any way perfect, quite the opposite.
No.
And
Yes.
so there were stresses and strains. Of course, there were in the job, but he was very grounded. And
Yes.
he was very, well, it seemed to me he was very grounded and he was very honest. And we always thought if we're honest about who we are and, honest with people, honesty begets honesty. When you're honest with someone, they'll often be honest with you. And we'd served in several places around the country, and suddenly on this particular Saturday, way back in 1996,
Mm.
it'll be 30 years this year,
Wow.
actually, Ivan.
Wow.
Little daughter was 2,
Yes.
and our 2 boys were 6
Yes.
and 11. So I remember walking down the hall and seeing this note for me and reading the note, and it was like being in a movie where the piece of paper fell onto the floor. And as I went down to pick it up, the first thought that came to my mind is maybe I should tell people he's died by heart attack,
Yeah.
because I knew that this was the beginning of a huge explosion
Yes. Yeah.
of all
Yeah.
kinds. But at the same time, I remember thinking, no, no, no. And I remember thinking, I'm going to stare suicide in the face. I don't know where that came from. Didn't remember feeling particularly courageous at the time.
No.
I
Yeah.
just knew
Yes.
that it's part of our humanity.
Yes.
So there was nothing to be ashamed of.
Yes.
We'd walked with many people through the years who'd struggled with suicidality, and I understood how hard this journey was. And Michael had lost a brother. When he was 14, his brother was 16. His brother had taken his life by suicide.
Wow.
So he had known it in his family, and we had talked about it through the years.
Yeah.
And he'd, worked through it and gone to counseling and all sorts of things through the years. So it wasn't completely foreign territory.
Yeah.
So from that moment, I remember thinking, whatever's going to come at me, there is no shame. There is no shame in this. There is only deep tragedy,
Yes.
deep sadness. I knew that people would have opinions. And because he was well known and respected for the way he was with people, the news went round really, really fast around the country, and our house was swamped. The phone was swamped. I was swamped. We were swamped. And so it began.
Yeah.
And, 30 years later, I never anticipated that in my life,
Yeah.
or should I say, in Michael's life.
Yes.
But I had to make sense of it because, we're meaning makers, right?
Absolutely.
And I didn't want an easy answer.
Yeah.
And every time someone said something stupid, which people do,
Mm.
it got me mad because I kept thinking, that's not my husband.
Yeah.
He's not selfish. He loved us completely. It was nothing about us. He didn't leave us. He left himself. And he didn't want to die.
Yeah.
He just didn't know how to keep on living.
Exactly.
And he didn't want to choose death. He just wanted to choose that the pain stopped.
Absolutely.
So I decided that I would learn everything I could because I owed it to the kids and to me. And every time someone said, "Oh, you'll never know why he died," I thought, I'm going to do my best to learn more,
Yeah.
to learn more. And I've
Yeah.
always been a words person, an information person. I'd gone towards teaching originally. I was sort of a natural educator, I suppose you'd say. So read everything I could, went and spoke to my church community and shared with them the beginnings of what was being learned more about suicide, which was 30 years ago. And,
Yes. Yeah.
there was little support. I live
Yeah.
in Wellington. It was very little support. And the fact that he was a minister, of course, made people go, what does that mean? But again, I don't think his faith, for all I know, his faith kept him alive for
Mm.
longer. Who's to say? I just knew that the God I loved
Mm.
continued to love him. And I heard, people say things, about it being a terrible sin. And I thought, what nonsense.
Yes.
It's just nonsense. It said about opening this thing called the Bible, and there are 7 times, Ivan, 7 times that suicide's mentioned.
Yeah.
Not one of them comes with
Yeah.
any condemnation.
Mm.
It's part of life. It's a tragic part of life. It's a
Mm.
sad part of life. And I came to understand it better because it was like a monster. And I thought I had to get it down to size somehow.
Yes.
I had to be empowered by knowledge about it.
Wow.
And it helped me and it helped the children.
Yes.
In fact, I have grandchildren today, and I heard
Oh.
one of my boys talking to my grandson when he was asking about how his granddad died. How did your dad die? And hearing my son use some of those phrases
Mm.
that we had had when we were so much younger, and I was only 37.
Mm.
They were
Mm.
obviously primary school age and a toddler. We had these ways of talking about it, that
Mm.
dad loved us.
Mm.
Dad absolutely loved us. So that there were things that were true, some things
Mm.
we'd never know,
Mm.
but there were some things that were deeply true,
Mm.
and they've stayed with me. So through the years since then, that sort of catapulted me into an arena. It was a big surprise, but I felt, again, if I'm honest, and I know I can be really disarming sometimes because I'm direct about
Mm.
what
Mm.
happened, but then if I'm honest, then it makes a bridge
Yeah.
for someone else to come a little closer.
Yes.
So, like, just recently, I had the privilege of meeting a family I didn't know who had lost a son and a brother
Mm.
through suicide. And, you know, it had just been the funeral time and spending time with them, thinking, what a privilege to walk on the sacred ground of someone's life and someone's loss and someone's grief. And I thought, as I often do, and you maybe do too sometimes, how the heck did I get here?
Yeah. Yes.
But
I hear
then you
you.
just work with that moment. I don't try to fix anything,
Mm.
but I share some of the ways I understand suicide now because we've learned so much more. And I try to yeah, I try to ground it, make sort of bring suicide down to size somehow. I
Mm.
think it's
Mm.
insidious, and I hate suicide with a passion, but it's also part of humanity.
Absolutely.
It's been recorded through all of history. It's that
Yes.
time when pain exceeds the resources of being able to cope with it. When that moment, when that internal pressure,
Mm.
that mental pressure exceeds a human's capacity to bear it.
Mm.
And no different than a heart attack or a kidney failure or anything else.
Mm.
And when we see it like that, we see it's part of human fragility. So in the early days, I was focused on the children and
Mm.
wanted to be the world's fastest griever. I was going to
Mm.
grieve really fast and really efficiently
Mm. Mm.
so I could be a good mama. Went to saw a grief counselor, and my 2 oldest kids went to a children's support group for bereaved children. And there were children there who'd been bereaved by homicide and suicide and natural sudden death, so traumatic situations. And actually, one of the kids there remains a close friend of one of my boys. Through this time, you think the world might come to an end because everything's black, everything's hard,
Yes. Of
everything's,
course.
and I remember rocking backwards and forwards one night
Yeah.
on my bed and I'm thinking, when have I felt anything like this? And it was when I came home from Argentina when I was 16
Mm.
and I came back to New Zealand
Mm.
and I was wrenched away from friends and it broke my heart. And I was just thinking, I think I rocked backwards and forwards then. And I thought to myself, why am I rocking backwards and forwards? And I thought, because I'm needing to, soothe myself. What's going to soothe me? Yeah. I mean, it seems
Mm.
weird. Here I am
Mhm.
doing it now. I should probably stop. Everyone's going to get seasick. So I recalled a conversation I had with a bereaved mum not long before Michael died.
Mm.
And she'd come to see me. And she'd lost a child. I had had bereavements in my life before, and I'd struggled with infertility and had had miscarriages, and that had been a hard journey. And moving around the world, while it might sound, oh, how
Mm.
exciting, actually it comes with lots of loss, as you know
Yes, right.
yourself, Ivan, comes with a
Yes.
lot of loss. Sometimes we call it homesick with
Yes.
like a little H, but it's huge.
Mm.
So,
It is.
and I'd lost people I knew, in fact, to suicide. And so, I'd had my fair share, like we all do.
Mm.
But this was grief on steroids, and the intensity of it was beyond anything I could imagine.
Yeah.
So through that time, from a faith perspective, my faith has been not tied to any particular church, although I attend to churches and I love to do life alongside other people and faith alongside other people. I was focused on the Jesus that I knew, and he was not
Mm.
changing. And he was someone who turned the world upside down. He called out the injustices. He called out um, the abuse of power. He called out exclusion. He called out all these things that became, I guess, my values too. So I just felt that he was it was a safe place to be following
Yes.
in his footsteps, so that I knew that there was no need for the children and I to hang our heads in shame. And I knew that we were safe and we would be safe, but it
Mm.
was going to take time. And it's taken a very,
Wow.
very long time. And even to this day, the trauma of that first day and those first weeks and months, that trauma doesn't completely disappear. I've had counseling, I've read, I've learned, I've talked to others, but it becomes part of your fabric. I like to think of my life like a patchwork, and all these patches get put together. And on the back of the patchwork, it's all a bit messy. But when you turn it around, it's just all these collection of glorious fabrics and colors.
Mm.
And around about that time, I remember seeing a mental health poster that came out of the UK, and it had all sorts of colors on it. And it just said, "Never let your colors fade."
Wow.
And I thought, yeah, how can we keep our life colorful and how can we keep curious? So anyway, I went and volunteered for a brand new organization that was called Skylight, that was for children who were grieving. And I thought, well, I'd love to give back because people have been supportive to us. I should say there are a lot of people who said a lot of mad things, but I was surrounded by people who really got it.
Yeah.
Authentic people who I could trust my grief to,
Mm.
for whom I will ever be grateful. For them, it was something they could do, so it relieved some of their stress over the situation because they were able to give to me. But I look back and I think they gave us a gift as a family
Yeah.
more than they knew, and it was just that gift of just being included, being remembered, laughing with, being with, you know, through dark times. Because of course it was their loss too, but it really made a difference. So as time went on, I started as a volunteer. I set up the resource centre there,
Mm.
and time moved on, and I could see there were resources missing. And remember, I'd been a teacher and I'd worked with young people, and so I just started to writing some, not because I thought I was the world's greatest writer, but because there wasn't anything.
Yeah. Yeah. It
So,
make a big difference. It
well,
was
I
really
just thought
needed.
information's empowering. It
Yeah. It
empowered
was
me
really
and it
needed.
empowered the children.
Yeah.
And when we were losing, when we had those terrible days, we'd often say things to ourselves like, we love each other and we're going to be
Mm.
okay. Just statements of truth
Mm.
you know, that kept us afloat. So, as things went on, our government contracted Skylight my services to help write the very first resource for people bereaved by suicide. But I was remembering it this morning, Ivan, I was laughing to myself thinking, we were only allowed to use blue and green.
Yeah.
They were the only colours. We weren't allowed to have any colours other than that. We weren't allowed to have any photos of any people,
Okay.
and the language was quite formal. I mean, it was an honour to be involved, but even then, there was this kind of, we've got to have something, said the
Yes.
government, but we've got to kind of keep it seemly, keep it
Yeah.
appropriate. And
Yes.
because it was scary. People who, they were dealing with us, they were trying to get it right. But that's, I guess, around then that I began to realize I didn't want to talk at people.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to people.
Wow.
And so that's been behind what I've tried to do. So opportunities, in my own faith life, I've just prayed, look, what comes to me, I'll honor those opportunities and give it my best. I've continued to read and to learn. I considered doing more formal training. I considered doing counseling training. I considered studying suicidology. I was a good scholar. I knew that I could go that way, but my gut feeling was that one of the things I could contribute most to was just being another human being
Yes.
there for other human beings,
Yes.
is shoulder to shoulder
Yes.
and sharing information and, yeah, walking alongside. And that's what I bring. So today, as time has passed through the years, I was at Skylight for about 15 years and met some amazing people and was able to serve through my writing and my educating in the education space. Of course, it wasn't just suicide, it was grief and understanding grief and loss and trauma, all those things. And because my husband Michael had been, well, I could see it afterwards, not at the time. He'd
Mm,
clearly been depressed, but we called
mm,
it tired and we called it exhausted because he was
mm,
never, there was no negativity, there was no self self focus, or well, it didn't
mm,
seem to be,
mm.
but he was
And
on autopilot
yeah,
probably.
and he's carrying a
So
lot of grief from other people as well, which is
that's
not
right,
talked
absolutely.
about
That's right.
30 years.
30 years ago, that's right. And he knew grief and he was able to speak their language so often. Anyway, I started to move and learn more around the mental health
Mm,
side of things. I remarried, and I remember sitting down and going out for dinner for the first time with this guy whose name's Adrian. He'd moved to Wellington, and we went out for dinner the first time, and I thought, oh, you know, how do I, broach this subject and explain my story? Because, that word suicide makes some people run in the opposite direction. And then
absolutely.
I thought to myself, goodness, if I think,
Yeah.
if there's anyone going to be in my world, they're not welcome if they're going to be shaming
Yeah.
or touchy about this. Anyway, he just sat back. He said, can I interrupt you for a minute? And I said, yes, sure. He said, I want you to know that my mother and my father are both psychiatric nurses. And he said, we've grown up in housing next to psychiatric hospitals. He
Yeah.
came from England originally. He said, so it's all good, and I suddenly thought he had no fear. Anyway, I then faced the journey of rebuilding a life with somebody new as stepdad for my kids as well. And, it takes time to get your head around how do you love a new person.
Yeah.
And weirdly, while that's on the face of it, all joy, I cried a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, it was grief. It was that weirdness of grief and joy right alongside each other. So through the years, I've been
Can I
fortunate.
just share with you? I know
Yes, do.
exactly what you mean. You crying because you know at the times like you truly have to let go. Am
Yeah,
I right?
yeah,
Yeah. And what does it mean by letting go of Michael?
yeah. What did it mean?
Yeah.
And, how do we continue that bond? So, especially because I had these three great kids growing up with me, or I'm growing up with them, shall I say? How do we, because I was parenting for 10 years on my own and, well, with the support of family and friends, but how do we go together forward and yet not lose the memories of
Mm,
their dad? And so much of my life, I mean, we'd lived a very rich and happy life with lots of opportunities and lots of memories of interaction with all kinds of people and situations through the years that I was so grateful for. So Adrian had previously been married also. So, it's just had a natural flow where we will
mm.
refer to Michael. And I remember taking him to visit the grave once at where Michael had his ashes were. And I remember how much we laughed when he said, actually, I don't know if this is inappropriate, but
Yeah.
I'd really like to have met him. And, these funny
Oh,
moments of the
yeah.
quirkiness of life.
Yeah.
Life is just so idiotic sometimes.
Yes.
So anyway, we've moved forward and I left Skylight about 14, coming up 15 years ago. No, it is 15 years ago. Really because I wanted to be able to do the same kinds of work, education and writing, but I also wanted to train in supervision because People who are counsellors, people who are social workers, people in the health field, they'll often be required to do supervision for their professional registration and for their professional safety, for their health and well-being. But there are so many people in social services like me
Mm,
who don't have those clinical qualifications, but we are coming up against truth and people's stories and
that's
the
right.
rawness of the harshness of some things. And I knew for myself how much I valued supervision. In the early days, my first supervisor was a bit of a horror. The first thing she said to me was, now I just want you to know we're not going to discuss anything personal. It's only work place. And I remember thinking, my life's a bit more integrated than that.
I
But
know.
anyway, so I trained in supervision and today am privileged to supervise people who are in frontline roles, but not necessarily with a clinical training. So I do have nurses and I have had social workers, but I also have people who are working in churches. I have youth workers. I have people working in social services, people in food banks,
Mm,
working with the homeless,
wow.
just a really broad range. And for me, I am fascinated how many times suicide comes up in my
Wow.
work through their work. Mental health issues of the clients that they're working with. And, they're the kinds of people, aren't they, who people turn to and say, "What should I do? What should
Yeah,
I do?"
of
But
course.
often there's a lack of confidence
Yes.
because they don't know. Because maybe that they missed that lecture when they were studying, or
Mm,
no one's ever sat down and talked to them about it. And also around their well-being, how do they keep sustained?
mm,
I was talking with some doctors recently, really senior doctors, and I asked for them to share with me, just put their hands up, how many of them have done a stress management workshop. Now, they've all been doctors for a minimum of about 15 years. One hand went up. I said, no, no, I probably didn't say it right. Like a stress management workshop about well-being things. Who's done a really good workshop about that?
for
Only one
themselves.
hand.
For
Yes, for
themselves.
themselves.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I was thinking, oh my goodness. So I guess when I look at my life, I'm still writing about difficult things.
Mm,
Often my name won't be against it because it'll be for a different organization.
mm,
Like I've just been privileged to write in the last year or so the new hospice guide for carers. How do we care for loved ones who are dying? If we have care for them in our homes, for example,
yes.
or if they're in a hospice or a hospital, how do we support
Yeah.
them? So the privilege of working with professionals and learning this information and then writing it to people and for
Yeah.
people. So when I write, I think, who am I talking to? So I'll imagine,
Mm,
someone who's in their mid 30s, or I'll imagine someone who's frightened and in their 70s. I'll imagine different people with English as a second language.
yeah.
What's this information like for them? Like,
Mm,
how can
mm,
they find this information? Or someone who's got really basic questions and are too afraid to ask
mm.
them. So I try in my work, I guess, to give people what I wanted always, which
Yes.
is practical, useful, honest. Yeah, honest, real information that's
Mm,
empowering. I always remember at Skylight, a woman ringing up and cancelling a counselling appointment.
mm,
And the reason given was because she'd read something that we'd given her
mm,
around how to support your child through difficult times. And she said, it had in it what she wanted to know, and she was gonna give that a go first.
mm.
And I thought it wasn't so much, she still could gain something from counselling, but it's an example of a bit of information can just, I don't know, just lift people
Yeah.
up a bit.
Yes.
Just
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
just yeah.
And I think there's a couple of things there's so much to unpack, but I really want to say thank you so much. I was crying all the way through my car. I couldn't stop. But I can sense the love you have for Michael. It was so strong.
Mm.
And I think if I want to say it's like you carrying his honor of who he is.
That's beautiful, Ivan. That's beautifully expressed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
because he was one of life's good guys. And as you will know, many people who sadly feel this compulsion or perhaps even obsession. I mean, I don't see suicide as a choice. Everyone just said it's just choice, like, oh, just a simple choice. But it's so much more complicated than that. And I just think if you're that in that much pain, we have no right to judge you.
yes,
Never. never. And, actually the 3 of my kids are one's 40 in his 40s now, the other's in their 30s, and they're soon going to be traveling to, gather to visit where his ashes are. Not with me, but just themselves, because they're interpreting it and come to terms with it, even all this time later as adults. These things shape our lives and how we see the world and how we, all of them have a sensitivity to people with mental health challenges,
Yeah.
obviously. But we also know that we are at high risk as a family. And we have had to, we've all had difficult times, and we've had to make sure that we reach out for help and not to hesitate to be honest about where we're at ourselves.
Yes.
We're not all sorted,
Yeah.
but
And
we're on the journey with other human beings. We're fellow pilgrims. We're all on the journey. Let's do it
yes.
together. I just was remembering this morning as I was thinking about what I wanted to share, and I was thinking there were some quotes that mattered a lot to me. And way back in 1903, there was a woman, Helen Keller. Some people will know who she is, some may not. Helen Keller, if you ever get a chance to check out her life, she's mind blowing. She was born with some disability and then through illness became more disabled. She was blind,
Yeah.
she was deaf, and she couldn't speak.
Wow.
So she was enabled through sign language, which in
Yeah.
those days was pretty early.
Yeah.
She was a very clever, clever woman. She would go on the speaking circuit through America with an interpreter, speaking on her behalf, interpreting what she had to say. But she just had this fire in her of insight that she wanted to share. And one of the things that she said was, although the world is full of suffering,
Yes.
because ain't that the truth?
Yeah.
That's my addition there.
Yeah.
It's also full of the overcoming of it.
Wow.
And when she wrote that, in the paragraph that she wrote that in, she was talking about her optimism is that the good of the world,
Yes.
and it can
Yes.
absolutely stand up to what's not good in the world. That sense of overcoming, that really encouraged me. And to think that a woman who had so much going against her
Yeah.
just had this tremendous ability to communicate her truth. I found also this wonderful quote that talked about courage, because I used to think about, we talk a lot about hope. And,
Yes.
people would say, oh, this gives me hope. And I'm thinking, this is good. And I want to be a hope broker. I want to
Yeah.
broker access to support and encouragement and inspiration, whatever it is somebody might need. And that's for
Yeah.
them to know what they need, not for me. But I love to give options. Like I love to, it's kind of like I'm a hostess with a smorgasbord. Here, look, here's these things you can try. Have you seen this? Would you listen to that? What about this music? Just all sorts of options. But sometimes the harshness of the world, it starts to just attach itself to you. And there are some days that it was hard to find courage again. And this quote says, courage doesn't have to be a roar, it doesn't have to be loud.
Mm.
Sometimes it's the small voice at the end of the day simply saying, I'm going to try again tomorrow. And that's always my prayer in my faith journey is, help me try again today. And there's that, there are so many images that, I'm an image person. So when I do trainings, I use lots of images. And I keep thinking of that quote, don't let your colors fade. And I'm thinking, it's not so much that I don't need to let my colors fade. I just want to make sure the world's colors, the good, the beauty, even the beauty in pain, the beautiful, just the really lovely things. Like when I was with the family recently, I referenced before, who were in such heavy, hard grief for the loss of their son and their brother. There were moments of exquisite beauty in their conversation and true laughter, and moments of smiles, which anyone outside the room would be going, what's that all about? But that is grief. So when I think of grief today, I don't think all black. I think black with bursts of little colour, bits of colour popping through. And as time went on for me, more and more colour came through.
Yeah. Can I?
But,
Yeah.
but
Yes.
it still bites.
Mm.
really hard. On the day my first grandson was born,
mm,
I was driving in the car. We'd gone down to Dunedin where baby was due to be born, and I was in the car with my daughter and my husband Adrian, and
mm,
we were expecting a call, and sure enough, the call came, and my son said, guess what? It's a boy because we hadn't known it's a boy, and congratulations. And the call was over, so in the back seat, my daughter's going yay, and my husband was going yay, and all I could hear was this strange animal noise, and I was sobbing, Ivan. I was absolutely inconsolable. I couldn't, and it took my passengers a time for them to realize all was not well. But it was grief. It
yeah,
was that awful grief. Where's your granddad? Why isn't he here? And I could give you many moments like that through the years. And it's not that I haven't dealt with grief. It's that it's part of my fabric. It's part of my patchwork. It's nothing to be worried about. It's something to understand. So I try to use language that's easy to understand. I try to
yeah,
take complex research, and I'm committed to doing genuine research and to keep abreast of good information.
yeah,
And I take it and I guess I try to make it understandable, straightforward, but accurate and sound, so that people who can't take in a lot will take in this bit and they will get it and they'll be able to breathe. I
and
remember in the early days, I went
yeah,
shopping for the first time and it was
yeah,
really scary. It would have been about 6 weeks after my loss. And I just went down the road. It's like 200 meters down the road, but I decided to drive. My mother went with me and we got to the shop and it was a butcher shop. She was wanting to get something for dinner because she'd come to stay with us for a wee while. And I said, look, can you just go?
mm,
So she went into the butcher's and when she got back in the car, she said, look, Ron
mm,
was his name. Look in the window. And
mm,
Ron was going like this, thumbs up. And I was thinking, oh, that's nice. And she turned to me. Now, keep in mind, I'd had 6 weeks
yes,
of people speaking encouragement and all of that.
yeah,
But Ron the butcher said to me through my mother, Tricia, you will be okay. And I heard Ron in a way I didn't hear, I hadn't heard others, but I heard him. There was something about his authority. I don't know. I never knew his surname, Ivan. I told him years later how huge that message was to me. And of course, he had no memory. He remembered my husband, he remembered my loss, but he didn't remember sending me a message through my mum. But in the same way that hard things can come, these glimmers of encouragement and light can come as well. I
I,
remember praying because we were so short of money when you're involved in church ministry.
yeah,
Well, in the church ministry
yeah,
we were in, you weren't in it for the money.
and
So I was on a widow's benefit, literally on a widow's benefit, and didn't have any money. I just remember praying, look, well, what are we going to do about this? And I walked out to walk down to the shops and went into the letterbox and there was notes, dollar notes sitting in my letterbox with a little paperclip. No message, nothing. I hadn't told anyone and there it was. And there are these moments of life that intrude through stories of loss and grief that I love to be able to help people to see
mm.
because they're there for all of us,
Can
in
I
different ways.
can I say something that I know even at the moment when you have the paper, what you decided at that moment, you choose love more than anything else.
Yeah.
You choose honoring Michael, you choose love,
Mm.
and that has been your language
Yeah.
and courage. But what I
Mm.
really love the most is you do not allow society to define the moments of Michael. That
That's true.
you
Mm.
say, no, this is not the Michael I know. And what I even love the most is you know what he was lacking of. He didn't have the support he needed. No one
Yeah.
saw it. The society didn't understand it. So you're doing everything in your power to
Yeah.
let people know. And so
Yes.
that
Yes.
was what you carry. And every moment
Mm.
when you know you have a chance, when he's not there, your crying is you knew if society was different,
Yes.
if help was there,
Yes.
this could have been prevented.
Correct. And of course there's the whole guilt piece, which,
Mm,
takes a lot to work through. But the more you understand, I found personally, the more I
mm,
understood suicide and the research around suicide and what's learned about suicide, the more grief starts to get its right perspective.
Yeah.
It's not grief, sorry, guilt.
Yeah.
Right
Yeah.
perspective. But even now, I have
Yeah.
flashes of, you know, those sorts of moments. Yeah. It is a grief like no other. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. I was
But
literally seeing the moment you talk about his life, I was crying all the way through. I can sense the love you still carry with him. I
mm,
can felt that genuine,
mm.
like that
Well,
heaven.
I just feel, for any of us who've lost anyone, whatever the reason, it's not just sad, it's our life changes.
Yeah, big time.
The bigger the loss, the bigger the grief. But even so, someone in my family has lost a pet
Mm,
recently. And for them in their daily life, it's a huge loss,
yeah.
a connection with that creature for many, many,
Mm,
many years. That's no less important. When Michael died, one of the things that really got up my nose more than anything else was when people said, because he was young,
yeah.
what a waste. They kept saying, what a waste of a life.
Mm,
And I just kept thinking, no,
no. Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's a children's book that a woman shared with me, a counselor I was seeing, shared with me, and it was actually for the children, but it's called, well, actually, it's got two titles because it's so just today you could look for it, it's called Lifetimes,
Yeah.
but it used to be called Beginnings and Endings with Lifetime in Between. I think Ing Pen and someone, I can't think of the surname, two authors and an illustrator. So beautiful illustrations. And basically what it says is it doesn't matter how long a lifetime is, whether it's as short as a
Mm,
butterfly
mm,
or
mm,
or a rabbit,
mm,
and it goes through the animals, it goes from flowers,
mm,
goes through all, and it gets to humans. But for it talks about, it doesn't matter how long it is, every life has a beginning and an ending, and what's between is called their lifetime.
mm,
And it's good. And as the book goes on, it says, and so it is with humans. Sometimes our bodies get so sick
mm,
or they get so injured that
mm,
they stop working, and
mm.
so we die. And that is our lifetime.
Wow.
And, having had miscarriages and struggled with infertility, I was
Mm,
painfully aware of, having a baby alive in you and then not alive in you.
mm,
And then somehow thinking, even in utero, however long or short life is, that's your lifetime. And it's not worth less because it
mm,
doesn't stretch this far. It's
mm,
just that's your lifetime. And so when I had Michael's funeral, I chose to put a wreath on his
mm,
casket, a circle wreath, because I thought for me it symbolized the completion of a really beautiful, good life. Never a waste because everything in that life had been used, every part of it. Of course, I wish he lived longer. Of
yeah.
course, of
Yes. Of course.
but my life, weirdly, and I'm sure you understand this, when we walk alongside others
Mm,
who are in pain,
mm,
who are struggling, it's such a damn privilege. I mean,
yeah.
you just meet some of the most incredible situations that otherwise you would never know.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
I yeah, I
yeah.
mean, I often think, like to really know and understand someone is not when they're most successful, it's when
Yeah.
they're least.
Yes,
That's when you truly see their vulnerability, who they are,
yes,
not when they celebrating who they are. I
yes,
mean, to be able to witness someone's being vulnerable
yeah,
is a privilege.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And I always believe that.
Oh, absolutely. We don't know I mean, we only live once, right? So,
Mm,
well, I think we only live once. So,
yes.
from where I sit, I feel whoever I meet along the journey, if we can make a contribution, why would we not?
Mm,
As a Christian, that's the Jesus I follow.
mm,
Let's
mm,
let's walk together,
mm,
um, and give each other a hand. That makes
mm,
complete sense to me. And I remember being at a hospital once with someone who had an operation, and across the way there was a young man who had just been told that he was going to have very serious surgery,
mm,
and it was life-threatening surgery. He was English, he'd only been
mm,
here a few
mm.
months, and there was a young girl sitting next to him who I assumed was his girlfriend or wife. I mean, you know
Yeah.
what hospitals are like, you don't really
Yeah.
know. Anyway, a bit later in the day, I was walking down the stairs. Hospital stairs go down and down and down, and I was walking down the stairs, and I saw this young woman coming towards me, crying.
Mm,
So I said to her, "Are you okay? I'm the lady who was across the way. Are
mm.
you all right?" So she collapsed on the steps. She literally collapsed, sobbing and crying, terrified. And she said, "I only met this guy a week ago, and
Oh my god.
he has no one in New Zealand. His
Yeah,
family's all in England. I can't let him go through this on his own." But she said, I hardly know him." She was beside herself. So we ended up having this very intense conversation on the hospital stairwell. People going all around us and whatever else. And, he had his operation and I don't know what happened and I never saw that girl again.
yeah,
But I often think it's those moments of intersection,
yeah,
human to human, that, that's the essence of life for me. That's when we intersect, that's where we give each other a hand. Who doesn't need a hand? I mean, who doesn't? There was a guy, an elderly gentleman, who heard me speak one day in my church community, and he came over to me. He was quite tall, and I'm only 5'2", so he was leaning right down, and he said to me in this whisper, "My brother did what your husband did," and then he went like this, and I said, "Ah," and he said, "But you're the only person I've ever told." So he would have been in his 70s. So in the months and years that followed, we had a relationship. So when he said hello to me or whatever, he'd just go like this, and I'd go like this, and we have this bond.
yeah.
Not even hardly a word
Yes.
spoken, but a this really strong bond because we do, you know, life together. When you close your eyes, Ivan, when you close your eyes at night and you think of the landscape of people in your world, I'm sure the people that appear are the ones who are standing with you and walking with you, or perhaps the ones who've gone before, perhaps a grandparent who's passed away, or,
Mm,
someone who's been precious to you who's no longer with you. They might be in the horizon. And we can see these different people, and we're not really truly alone when we know that we've got others to do life with us, even if we're on stairs and it's just someone who we never see again.
yeah,
Even if it's an intersection for a moment.
yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
Is that human connection, sometimes it doesn't have to be big. It can be small.
That's
As
right.
like what you say, like that moment of honesty and candid, like moment of
Yeah.
connections, and
Yeah.
and that's enough. That's the beauty of all. It's like you don't have to go and find it. It's
No.
just in front of us.
And if we can empower each other.
Yeah.
Language is really important to me because we can get ourselves all complicated and talk about grief like it's a pathology,
Mm,
or even talk about suicide. It's not that I don't appreciate academic research because that grounds my work and informs my work.
absolutely.
But we got to find language that just ordinary, everyday people understand.
I with you.
And I had a bit of a laugh to myself because when I have written things sometimes, they'll be edited. And when I've used contracted things like you
Yeah.
apostrophe LL, or,
Yeah. Yeah.
we're, and the editor will take them all out to be more formal. And I'll
Yeah.
say, you put them
Uh-uh.
all back in
Good on
because
you.
that's the way we hear each other's voices.
Awesome.
And I always, in my resources, I collect people's voices and I put their quotes all the way through.
Yeah.
Because this isn't a Trisha show.
Uh,
I just feel like, I don't know, kind of like a conduit, like a conduit.
yeah.
I want to be worked through so that something positive happens. I have to say, it's not without cost. Was really interested. I'm going to read you a quote. I just was looking at the news this morning, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with Marlon Williams, who's a Kiwi singer
Okay.
who's been an award-winning singer. And the headline was, Williams takes a break from New Zealand music. Anyway, this is the quote. So he's a hardworking musician. He says,
Yeah.
"It's such a blessing to do what you love, but it can be easy to overlook the toll it can take over time on your body and your soul. So I'm taking time out to have a cup of tea and a lie down, and maybe I'll get a dog."
Love
And I
it.
thought,
Love it.
we all need a cup of tea and a lie down, and maybe get a dog.
Yeah.
So I've had to learn that too. So, I mean, I'm great at running well-being sessions, but I'm constantly needing to apply it to myself. When
It,
you do something you love,
yeah.
you can pay a toll and think, "Oh, it's fine." But,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it can
And
be
I
hard.
I like I mean like your journey my God, I can't even imagine. I really can't. How you I can't even
Well, we don't know how we do it either. Don't we just put one foot in front of the other? I, I found ways of using humor. I always remember being at a concert type thing, and I'd gone with friends, and in the foyer just before it was started, I found myself in a group of about 10 people, and I was just, one of them. It would have been about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years after Michael had died. And suddenly this woman who I didn't know, who was right across the circle from me, suddenly said, "Oh no, I know who you are. I know who you are. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I know who you are."
uh,
And I knew exactly what was happening. She was
uh,
going, "That's the woman whose husband killed himself." That's what
yeah,
she was
yeah,
thinking.
yeah, yeah.
But and at the time it was horrendous. Soon after, even before the concert was finished, I thought, how ridiculous. What a stupid stupid response. The things like I've had people tell me, I had one person tell me to wear really tight clothes so I could feel that Michael was hugging me. I had people tell me how long grief lasted, that it was only 2 years and then I'd be fine.
Yeah,
Everyone has
right.
their, because we want to make meaning, we want to.
Yeah,
But no, I just feel grief is so unpredictable, it's harsh, but there's moments of joy that are exquisite. It's a shared human experience across ethnicities, across religions, across countries, borders, grief without borders. you know, it's expressed in a million different ways, and we just got to find our own way through. And when we do, maybe it makes us a bit more caring to make room for others who are coming on the grief journey too, eh?
Tricia, what I really love is you allow love to transcend time and space. You
Yeah,
didn't allow love to stop just because he have gone.
it's gone. No.
Yeah, you're saying, like I know the love between us. I going to honor it and I let it live. And I don't know, that's how I felt. I
Yeah.
still feel that
Yeah.
the reason why I keep crying, I connect to love very strongly. If I walk into a
Yes.
space, I can feel love. I will just keep crying.
Or the absence of it.
Yeah. Yeah. As soon as you start, like, oh my God, I walk into a wardrobe in the theater and I
Mm,
couldn't stop crying because I
mm,
can just sense the happiness, joy. I can't even
mm.
verbalizing it.
Yes.
I just walk through, I just cry. I
Mm.
said, my God, I don't even know why I keep crying because
But
of the
tears
essence of it.
tears are tears are an expression of love.
It
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, I
And
mean, I did get
yeah,
I've had angry, but my anger came out. My anger still comes out. My anger comes out in the stupid things people say, but then I think,
yeah,
but if I can educate them
yes,
to stop, like when I first went to find out about suicide at the Wellington Public Library, I had
yeah,
to look in the crime section.
yeah. My
That's where it
God.
was. And
Yeah,
I went to the poor librarian and was kind, but I said, "This has got to come out of the crime section."
yes,
She was, because that was just the Dewey system, that was the
yes,
library
yeah,
system.
yeah,
It's not there now. But, to help people understand that Michael didn't commit suicide because that
yes,
came from criminal
yeah.
terminology. He was
That's
so
right.
far not a criminal,
That's right.
quite quite the opposite. But if we can say, that someone I love, someone I knew has taken their life or has died by suicide, says exactly the same thing, but there's no crime and there's no sort of sense
No,
that
yeah.
there's somehow, that they're unworthy or that they need judgment or shame. No.
And
And don't you
yeah,
think there are moments when, you intersect with someone for a short
yeah,
time or a long time, and you look at them and they look at you, and there's that moment of human looking to human,
yeah, yes.
you stand a little taller. Yeah, I mean, my mum had dementia, but she's
Mm,
since passed away. But one of the things she taught me was, although she had no memory,
mm,
short-term
mm,
memory gone, that in the moment, if in the moment things were good, then that
mm,
was a moment of her life that was good.
mm,
That was a contribution. Even if she
mm,
couldn't remember it, it will have
mm,
helped her nervous system calm down. It will have,
mm,
lifted her spirit. And I remember asking her one day, there'd been at the home where she was, there had been a special event, and I said to her, "What did you do today?" And she said, I really don't remember, dear, but I know I had a really lovely time." And I thought, that's what we want. We want
Yeah.
to do what we can. We can't fix stuff. We can't fix the harshness, but we can do what we can. So, for example, you and I got to know each other
Mm,
through the advisory group that we serve on. And that's where sometimes I mean, it's sort of my frustration and anger that in a way takes me there because
mm,
I want to
mm.
help make meaningful change. We just seem to be going round,
Absolutely.
round, and
Yeah.
round, thinking, "Oh, for heaven's sake, give
Yeah.
me a weekend,
Yeah.
and I could get this sorted if you just give me a budget. We'll get
Yeah.
this sorted." I guess the frustration about Michael's death, as you said, could have been preventable. Yes, and yet, like any kind of health condition can be preventable, and yet we don't always understand it or see it or
Absolutely.
recognize it. And, depression has lots of different faces,
That's right.
especially, high functioning depression is readily missed for many. And in the early days, I beat myself up for that, thinking, how could I have missed it? And then I remember a woman saying to me, how could you have seen it?
Yeah.
I thought, good question. And I
Yeah.
remember saying to a friend, if only he could have lived longer. And she said to me, how do you know you didn't keep him alive for a lot more years than otherwise he would have had?
Exactly.
Oh, oh, actually,
Exactly.
there's lots of ways of looking at these things that are honest and true. And
Yeah.
it's not easy, but we're all in this life business together. So
Yeah.
I
And
write, I teach, and
yeah.
I try to encourage my supervisees. And it's always a privilege to hear their journeys and all the different jobs that they're doing.
Yeah.
And as you said before, it's often small things that we forget, that just turning up to see someone and give them a food parcel, that's not nothing. That is something. So, yeah,
Yeah. And same, I would have loved to meet Michael.
he was a goodie. Yeah. And,
Yeah.
his artistic spirit, when I wrote a year after he died, I wrote to the ministers in the Baptist church all around the country because I thought, I want to share some of what I've known. And I said in that, I read it recently, so it was 29 years ago I wrote it. And it said something along the lines of, he had a heightened sensitivity to life that made this life particularly demanding
Yeah. That's right.
in a way that those of us who don't have that sensitivity
Yeah.
don't understand.
Absolutely.
Because we just transfer our thinking. We just think, well, why didn't they think that? And, why were they so self? We just transfer what we think they should be thinking and assume that's what they should be thinking. But they're in a whole different sphere,
Yes.
a whole different way of thinking at that point. And we can't we can't easily understand, but we certainly understand more than we did. I like to be able to share some of what I've learned. Yeah.
And I think usually I know how to finish a podcast. It's the first time I really don't know how to finish it. And then I just going to say it through my heart how I felt.
uh,
Um, thank you. I think thank you for taking your time and let me get to meet Michael.
mm.
Thank you for being so honest, candid, and carrying his legacy.